Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Graduation Equity webinar. What's happening? My name is Kathy Anderson. I am an assistant director for early warning systems at OSPI. And today we are talking about orientation practices to boost connection. This meeting's being recorded and it should be available in the next couple days on YouTube. We do have closed captions if you want to use those. And our PowerPoint is on our page. If you want to follow along, we'll also drop it in the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to. This webinar is brought to you through the Office of Student Engagement and Supports at OSPI. At OSPI, we believe each student needs to be prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. The Graduation Equity webinar series was created to highlight practices that increase access to education and graduation. Through the webinars, we're striving to think critically about historical context and the opportunities we have to get curious about and dismantle policies and practices that don't serve our youth, and to create the kind of schools where kids thrive. As we launch into the summer, I'm seeing a beautiful sunny day. It's supposed to be a beautiful week. The leaves on the trees are starting to fill in, and the natural world is just beautiful. And I want to acknowledge just the beautiful land that we live on today, and to invite you to also honor the traditional lands where you live as well. We have some links in our resource page if you want to check that out if you're not sure. In my life, I mostly traveled the traditional lands of the Squaxin Island, the Coast Salish, the Cowlitz, and the Nisqually tribes. And I'd like to acknowledge the indigenous people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial and who still live here today. Welcome. And also shout out to our Office of Native Education. If you'd like to learn more about land acknowledgement and tribal consultation, we would love to connect you with them. I want to ground our discussion in equity today by talking a little bit about being welcomed. There's a huge difference that you can feel in the atmosphere, I think, when you're welcomed into a space. And we definitely know when we're not welcomed. Orientations, I think, are often a point of access, and that begins a long time before an orientation actually happens. They also carry with them the promise of a school culture and what a student can expect throughout the school year. And we know many families in Washington are multilingual, so if they even get invited, it matters a lot. I know from my own experience, both of my parents were teachers, and I know that I benefited from that immensely because they knew some of the activities of my school, but even so, they missed deadlines for things like sports and clubs all the time. So not all parents have that level of access or feel invited to participate. And orientations are a powerful place to make sure you're creating that welcoming space. Today we'll be talking about the elements of orientations. You'll learn some strategies you can use to create connectedness, not just at your orientation, but all school year long. And you'll also learn about special considerations for newcomer students and their families. And we have some resources that'll help you get started. I'm joined today by my colleague, Virginia Caro Morales, our OSPI Assistant Director of Multilingual Education. And as well as Henderson Carlisle, the Northwest Regional Director for the Center for High School Success. Henderson and I have been working in partnership for 4 or 5 years now on ninth grade success, and he's incredibly knowledgeable about the transition to high school. He's heard about the orientation strategies that schools are implementing across the state and helped to plan intentional ways to make that transition convey a sense of belonging. And I wanted him to be able to share that with you today. Um, Henderson comes with 21 years of public school experience. And Henderson started his education career as a middle school math and science teacher. He served as an associate principal at Mercer Island High School. And helped to lead their journey into diversity, equity, and inclusion work. He's also been a principal at Madison Middle School. Welcome to you both. We'll also have a panel coming up later on. We want to know who you are, so we are going to launch a poll and see who's in our audience today. If you can tell us a little bit about your role, what grade band you're in, and how familiar you are with our topic, that would be awesome. Lots of friendly faces in the chat. Thank you for coming. Thanks, y'all. And it looks like we have quite a few school counselors, school site community liaisons here, as well as quite a few folks from district office, ESD staff, OSPI. Lots of middle or high school folks in the audience. And people are somewhat familiar with this topic. So if we can get really specific, that would be great. I also wanted to share with you all. This is our last show for the school year that we're going to do. And so we want to encourage you to sign up for our next run. And I'm sure one of my buddies here will be putting that link in the chat so that you can sign up right now for next year's registration link. So you can join us for next year in August. And we have another poll question for you because we want to try this cool audience participation thing where we want to see which topics appeal to you. So we went out to our staff and we looked at all of our feedback surveys and we had some topics that people brought forward. And we have this list that is kind of long, honestly, and we have to narrow it down to our 10 shows. And so the ones that most appeal to you, if you can, scroll down, make sure you get all the way to the bottom of the list, but if you can let us know the ones that appeal to you the most, we'll make a case for the ones you vote for when we're putting together our calendar. And I'm going to leave that running for just a minute. So we can see it. But lots of people, it looks like, are interested in supporting students after a prolonged absence. That seems like a good one. College and career pathways is great. And if you don't see the topic that you most want to learn about, if you want to put it into the chat for us, we would also really love to capture any thoughts you have about shows that we should be doing that you'd love to see. So I want to encourage that as well. We are going to head over to Virginia. Virginia, do you want to talk a little bit about what you know about multilingual supports and what OSPI has to offer?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation, Kathy. And it's wonderful to see so many familiar faces in the chat and new faces. So, for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Virginia Caro Morales, and I am the Assistant Director of Multilingual Education here at OSPI. All right, well, let's get started. And, the goal of this session today is really about orientation, boosting orientation. And so, if we think about one of the first strategies we need to employ is how do we get students and their families through the door, get them to attend our orientation. So I invite you to think outside the box because you're already using traditional methods of emails and perhaps some sort of parent communication system. But think about where your multilingual students, where they live, where their families congregate. Think about community events that you can attend in order to meet your audience. So think about how you can immerse yourself in the community in order to reach the families that you don't traditionally see at school events. And that may be connecting with community organizations that you know your families are a part of. Look around your school. Who are your parent leaders? Do you have multilingual parent leaders that you can partner with so that they can then share information with their community? And it's almost like creating a phone tree, right? Let them be the voice and invite others to join the school community so they can be involved in what is happening. And also look at your feeder schools. Do they have a practice that you can replicate or adjust that is working well for them to continue in at the high school setting in order to get families and students through the door and participating in your orientation practices? So just some things to consider as you're hearing all of this great information to think about, well, how can I get it to the families who need it most? All right. So, just some additional considerations when thinking about your outreach for multilingual families. And first and foremost, there is translated materials, thinking about language access and what are the top languages spoken within the school, and are you able to reach families with translated materials? And again, we already spoke to that intentional outreach and tapping into community. And I love the idea of a parent panel, of having parents share their experiences so that you as a school can learn from them and parents can learn from each other as well. We know that as educators, we learn from each other, so parents will want to do that as well. Creating parent networks is powerful because you're creating an avenue for parents to give feedback to the school and a way for school to connect with families on important topics. So, definitely something to consider. And when you're thinking about your orientation practices, really think about including information on how to navigate the system of school. If you have newcomers, the US schooling system it's foreign, right? It by nature is going to be something completely foreign to our parents, and where we may think students will already know how to access a locker or what physical education entails, or even how to navigate the school lunch system. They need help with that. And so think about how can you provide that before school starts, before a student starts schooling here, so that they're more comfortable in the school environment. And always have surveys that really speak to the needs and concerns of parents so you know what your community wants. All right. I want to highlight two resources that are contained within the care package, and you have access to these resources. I just want to tell you what's in them so you know exactly how you can utilize them. And the first thing I want to highlight is the definition of what a newcomer student is. And traditionally, this is a K-12 students who are born outside of the United States, and they have recently arrived to the country, and they're typically learning English for the first time. I say typically because many of our newcomers already come with some basic English, which is fabulous if that is the case. And often they do come with schooling as well. It's a misnomer to think that a newcomer student has not had formal schooling. The percent of students who have not had formal schooling is very low. So your students are coming with a wealth of knowledge that is just contained within another language. So our job is to really tap into that to know, what do students know? What are they bringing with them? And how can we utilize that within this new system of US schooling? And so I want to skip to that that second bullet of an intake system. Our chapter 8 of the Washington Policies and Practices Guide outlines how to develop an intake system so that you're collecting this information. You're collecting student histories, their family histories, their schooling history. So important, because students will have credits that, or have taken classes that will transfer for credits. And as we all know, we're looking for that in order to increase graduation, the possibility of graduation for newcomer students. So very important to establish that system. And then thinking about their native language proficiency. How proficient are students in their native language? Can they read in their native language, write in their native language? Because all of that will create a positive language transfer as the student is learning English. So that is contained within these two resources. The other resource being the Newcomer Toolkit, which is published by the U.S. Department of Education. And as you are developing this welcoming school culture, there's one course that I'd like to recommend. And this course is offered through WIDA, who is our partner for assessments and English language development standards. And the course is Newcomers Promoting Success Through Strengthening Practice. This will provide schools a way to develop a culture within the school that promotes and supports newcomer students, and really thinking about what it is that students need in order to have a successful experience within the US schooling system. So very excited to share that information with you. And if you have any questions, my email was at the beginning of this presentation, and I welcome any questions, and reach out to myself or anyone on our team. We're always happy to help. Thank you, Kefi.
Thanks, Virginia. We also wanted to have the opportunity to think
Thank you.
about things statewide. So we wanted to launch kind of a chat poll about what orientation strategies you're using. I think part of the power of this group is that so many people are here from across the state. So if you want to share some of the things that you've used that are helping with your orientations, I just want to invite you to share them so that we can see them throughout the webinar in the chat and as we go.
Yes, thank you. If I could also add, thinking about, have you done some outreach, or how are some unique ways that you're connecting with families as well? That is valuable, because what works for one school doesn't work for another, but collectively, we can definitely brainstorm of some ideas.
Yes, please. And the links are in our resource sheet that's linked in the chat. They'll also be up on our webpage through the slides too. So we're going to go to Henderson next. Henderson, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the big ideas?
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you today to talk about orientation practices. Again, I am Henderson Carlisle. I'm the Northwest Regional Director for the Center for High School Success. We are an organization that is in 9 states, and we partner with high schools and districts to improve graduation rates through a focus on 9th grade success. So really trying to ease that transition from middle school into high school and setting students up for success early in their high school experience. So thinking about orientation, here are just some big ideas. The first one is meaningful connections matter. We know that developmentally, where students are, they're in that identity development stage, and that these connections that they create and build in high school are going to go a long way in aiding them in their development, their identity development. So meaningful connections matters. Orientations are an opportunity to welcome students to the school community. A lot of times, if they are the oldest in their family, this may be the first time they're coming into a high school. This may be the first time that a family is experiencing having a child in high school. So orientations are a great way to welcome students, and a lot of times is that first opportunity. And then thinking about orientation is just one part of a school-wide plan for building culture and belonging. Standalone orientations are okay, but if you want to really create these meaningful connections throughout the year, it has to be a part of a larger school plan. So here are 4 grounding statements just to help us get grounded in connectedness, inclusion, and belonging. School connectedness refers to the extent to which students feel personally accepted, respected, included, and supported by others in the school social environment. So really, how are they feeling in your school? Do they feel seen or unseen? An inclusive environment ensures access and unconditional belonging for every person. And I think the key word there is unconditional, that they're not parameters set or targets set on a student belonging or fitted in or being included into the school. Belonging means more than having just access. It means having a meaningful voice, an opportunity to participate in the design of the political, social, and cultural structures. And finally, fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who I need to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are, which is very important. We often hear students talking about they don't fit in or fitting in. And the ideal that true belonging, I can show up as I am, is really rich and at a different level than fitting in. So again, wanting to talk about orientation, a small part of a larger plan. Really, as we go through this presentation and thinking about your own plan for belonging that is school-wide, thinking about how does orientation fit into that? How does your 9th grade plan for building connectedness and belonging fit in to that? And so that thinking about that orientation, while important as a first step, needs to be a part of a larger plan. So some key elements of a school-wide plan for belonging. So really thinking about these elements are key for creating this comprehensive plan for belonging. So first, thinking about student voice and agency. How are students able to contribute their voice in a meaningful way in the process for decision-making process within the school? So how are you hearing from students? Is that through their only means is ASB? Do you have different opportunities for students to contribute their voice? Inclusive environment. So fostering an inclusive environment where diversity is celebrated and students feel respected and valued. Thinking about how are you doing that? We have schools that are very diverse, or even schools that may not on the outside seem as diverse, but do have diversity within their walls. And so what are those strategies that we're doing so that every student is seen and heard and valued? And then the supportive staff. How are we training our teachers to be mentors or advocates for students? Is that a part of the staff culture? How do we create these relationships and build the trust between students and teachers? So those are the first three key-wide elements. Next is promoting positive relationships. What structures are in place to build the positive relationships between peers and teachers and other staffs? So is that through advisory, or is that through an adult to student mentorship program? Thinking about how are we going to promote those positive relationships? And again, a part of that is building that trust, strengthening connection, strengthening belonging. Then community engagement. What are we doing to engage our parents throughout the year, not just seeing them early in the year through orientation or through curriculum nights, but how are we doing meaningful parent engagement? Are you reaching out to parents to ask them what they would like to see, how they would like to be involved? Are you doing intentional outreach to parents to get them in the building to share in how they can best support their students? And then celebration. That's something I don't think we all do. Sometimes that gets left behind, but really wanting to celebrate our students. Not only academics and extracurricular, but personal achievements, but really celebrating our students for many of the things that they do. We all have great students in our school, and sometimes their achievements are overlooked. So again, as part of this larger plan, what celebrations? So that really means to be intentional is really calendaring them out, so that we are sure that throughout the year we are having these celebrations and kids can see themselves being celebrated. And the last two, conflict resolution, restorative practices. We've got to teach students how to resolve conflict. When they get into situations where someone's been harmed, we need to have systems in place to make sure that we are teaching students how to go about that process of repairing relationships. And then at the end, the last one is wellness and mental health support. Making sure that schools are thinking about how they can best support students with mental health. We know that the remnants of COVID are still there. There's still a lot of trauma going on with socially, politically, all that, and students are experiencing that. So as schools and thinking about our plan for belonging and connection, do we have those services in place to help students with mental health and wellness? So supportive structures for building connections. So thinking about orientation, and as we think about orientation as this opportunity to get students into our school, getting them into to visit our school community, to talk about what's going on in our school, thinking about how some of the guiding questions for building connections are, how are you going to build the connection and belonging? You know, what are those things, those strategies we want to use to strengthen the connection? What are the tenets of your community? What does it mean to be a student in your school? And from there, okay, how are we going to teach that to the students? How are we going to introduce that to them? And then thinking about how do you leverage older students? Link Crew is a great example of a program where older students are able to mentor younger students. They're great to be able to introduce them to the ways of school. And, students want to hear from other students more than they want to hear from adults. ASB clubs and sports teams are also other ideals of student personnel that you could use to help build those connections and help with orientation. Some other activities that you can use with schools that we've seen with students are scavenger hunts, different team building activities, for instance, the straw tower build. So these are all activities we want to get students interacting with each other, because their previous friend groups, they've been disrupted, especially if you're drawing from different middle schools. So thinking about students are coming in, some of those lifelong friends they've had K-8, they may not see again. And so how do we then bring students in to meet each other, to begin to develop those kind of peer relationships that are going to be new to many and that they're going to need as they continue going through schooling. So think about academic and social supports. And again, the guiding questions are for you to think about what you're doing for these particular supports. So thinking about academically and the social emotional supports. Students want to hear about that early. Families want to hear about that early. They want to hear about what you have to offer and how they can access that. Because that will help alleviate some of those fears that are natural when people step into new environments. So some of those ideals are around the academics help, the counseling support, advising, and mental, extracurricular ideals. So these are all things as we are building orientations. These are supports to have within the orientation. Parent engagement. Families are busy these days, and they really care about the kids, and they want to be involved with their students' academics lives and their social life. But a lot of times when we get to high school, parents, they don't know how to, because there's that ideal, that balance of independence, but also the ideal that they still need guidance. And so having engagement activities for parents to help them learn how to best support high schoolers. Like I said before, a lot of times these are first-time high school parents, and so they need that support also. Also thinking about your multilingual parents, and then what supports are in place to help them navigate. That's helping with passwords, that's helping with access, helping parents know where to find the help they need to support their students and support their families. And some of those ideals are around translated materials, interpretation services. And some of these were said before. The parent buddy system, when you kind of think about in elementary school, where they had the class parent. So what can we do to help? Is that a grade level set of parents that are ninth grade parents, where ninth grade parents can call them, email them, communicate with them to get the support they need to engage their student in school. So again, guiding questions to help you think about, help you frame what you're doing, and then some ideals to fill in that. Peer and adult mentoring programs. If that's something you want to do, thinking about, do you have the supports, the structures to support peer mentors? If you're moving that way, how do you recruit peer mentors? It's not always trying to find the smartest kids to be peer mentors. You want some students in there who have had different experiences, who have grown, who have been through the highs and lows of high school. Not just always the top kids, but you want a well-rounded mentor group. And then thinking about data, how do you use data to match up a mentor with a mentee? Is there some specific information you would want from your ninth graders and your mentors so that you can get a best fit? Some ideas, again, Link Crew, Check and Connect is a program out of University of Minnesota that has some structures to it. And then also thinking about an adult champion. So how can our staff be mentors to our students? Doesn't always have to be peer mentors, but are you using advisory as sort of that relationship building opportunity in your schedule? Or how can you think about using your staff where every staff maybe sort of adopts 3 or 4 kids that they take on as a caseload that they kind of follow through, and they are that student's champion. So just again, a few ideas thinking about peer mentorship programs. So thinking about transition planning. The trend, again, orientation, just one part of a larger transition planning process for schools and for students. And so want to just talk a little bit about early preparation in the high school. So thinking about this is a larger picture than just orientation. But thinking about the 8th to 9th grade orientation, establishing ongoing parent engagement. Again, we've talked about some of these things. Thinking about conducting summer activities. Are there opportunities to bring in your 9th graders during the summer to do different activities? So whether that's some of that building that peer-to-peer relationships, are there other opportunities for students to be on campus or to get together just so they can start building their own cohort, start building this new friendship group that they're going to have starting in high school? And some of that, which you can use some data for that, is really looking at their 8th grade data. So you want to look at that. You want to know when you're building orientations, who's coming into your school. So using that data early in the spring to help tailor your orientation programs will be crucial, because then you're able to give them the information they need to make a best fit in terms of them coming in and the type of activities you want to use. So as you're thinking about this transition planning, thinking about the orientation, thinking about parent engagement, thinking about summer activities, what's in place, and are there opportunities that you can explore at this time? Some transition planning timelines. If you're thinking about, okay, we want to provide some proactive supports, what does that look like? So April and May right now is developing that partnership between middle and high school. Using this time to really get to know again that data, finding that data access, and getting to know what students are coming up, what's their strengths, are there students that need to, that you need to identify that need some intentional supports. May and June, so this time now, really thinking about your orientation. A lot of schools do the spring orientation, bring them in where they have their a club fair, sports fair, maybe talking about electives, because I know that there's forecasting going on now, but using that spring orientation to get students on campus during the day when there are other students there so they can get a feel of high school. And then this summer, again, making sure that you have the 8th grade data and that you're looking at it and really analyzing it so that you can set up some strategic structures and systems for students incoming. And then as you get to August and September, really providing a well-rounded orientation, one that offers opportunities for students to get to know each other, start building trust within each other, building their new peer group, one that provides them, allows them to meet their teachers, allows them to get a feel for the building and just some of the other features and supports that they can expect in high school. So orientation and summer bridge considerations. So orientation can happen in many different formats, and we see it all over the state and the schools we work with. So there are the one-day formats. And when you're doing that one-day format, some considerations, really thinking about that date for maximum attendance. And that's not only attendance for families coming in, but attendance for your helpers, your adult and student helpers, and who are going to participate. So taking advantage, whether there's sports practicing going on, are your student leaders available during that time? And then also, what connection activities are you going to do? Again, this is a time to start building connections, allowing these 14-year-olds to get to know new people, because a lot of times they're going to create new friendships and new partnerships. And then student engagement sessions. So that's a lot to get into one day, but can be done. And that's sort of that typical format. Thinking about multi-day formats. So that looks like, I think the first thing is around the dates. Is that 2 or 3 days before school? Is that closer to school, or is it 2 to 3 weeks outside of school? When you're thinking about a multi-day format, thinking about funding, how will you pay for it? Is there grants? What budget lines are you thinking about using? Do you have available to use? Multi-day format, really thinking out your scope and sequence, because there you have the opportunity to get some data, to get some data on your students. So whether you're doing some baseline assessments, you have the opportunity to balance out between that, the peer building, the peer activities amongst their peers. This is where you can also start to teach them the study habits and the habits of being a solid student, how to do school one-on-one, so to speak. And so that's those multi-day format considerations. Other things we've seen is the first week of school format. So some schools will change their schedule the first 3 days. And that could look like where there's no academics. We've got a couple of schools that the first 3 days, there are no backpack days. It's all about building relationships. It's all about starting to build belonging in the school. It's all about just getting students acclimated before we even hit academics. How do we learn how to be a school community? How is that going to look in this class, in this school? Also, again, first week activities, is it a modified schedule? Is it building wide? Or is it just ninth graders? So you have a lot of flexibility in the building wide, but it also takes coordination. And then thinking about summer bridge, and we consider summer bridge a 4 to 6 week type summer program. That is more intense for students. There's a lot more academic pieces going on. There's also that social emotional learning, but that's where we can identify some specific targeted students we want to come, or it can be open to all depending on your capacity. And right here are just some of the things to think about. The student recruitment, who are we targeting? The staffing that we're going to use, funding, instructional. So we have this as a part of the resource where there's a whole planning guide around that with each of these categories as a part of the plan. And it really walks you through and allows you to think through these different sections of building a summer bridge. So orientation can be more than the 1 day deal. It can be several days. You can leak it into the beginning of the school year, or you can have a more intense summer bridge where you're really going to know your students, but also are able to address some of their needs that you would like to address before coming to high school. So thinking about quick wins, way to get started is, first of all, having that orientation planning committee, or what group of staff or people are planning the orientation. Setting clear objectives for the orientation, knowing exactly what you want to get done over the orientation. And then engaging student leaders in your school. So identifying who those students are, who you want to help, those older students. Communication with stakeholders, especially around dates, what's going to be happening during the program, so that parents are clear on that, so that they can see that this is something that is crucial for their student and for them to engage in. And then creating a plan for parent engagement. So again, we want parents to engage throughout the year, not just a 1 or 2 times in the fall, but how do we get that throughout the year? And so those are some quick wins to get started. Again, what I talked about was more bigger picture, and I think through the panel, you're going to be able to hear more specific strategies that schools use. And I just want to thank you for that, but always remembering that orientation is a part of the larger plan for belonging and building connectedness throughout your school.
Thank you, Henderson. Let's show Henderson some love with your reaction buttons, everybody. I appreciate these ideas and yeah, learning from your experience with all of the different schools across the state. Okay, great. I think we had a couple of questions in the chat and the Q&A, and I want to make sure we get to those as well. Jocelyn, what did you see out there?
We have a question that states, are there tips for providing resources in a way that is accessible for families and students who are coming from backgrounds where oral language proficiency is dominant over written language proficiency, and written translations of written materials won't necessarily support their understanding?
That's a great question. And I think from that, again, knowing your families, being able to get a pulse of what is needed, I think would it be important for families who need that oral, more of that, they have that oral learning style. I really think just providing opportunities where there's more dialogue, more storytelling, more opportunities to have conversations versus dependent on written material. And so what that looks like, again, are just having sessions where students, parents, and families are able to have these deeper conversations, and they're able to get that information orally versus dependent on the written form. And if anybody else has any great answers to that, you can put them in the chat.
Yeah, I'd like to build on your response, Henderson. Those are great suggestions. And also leveraging technology. Many districts have the ability to send out recorded messages So if you happen to have a para or somebody who can do that oral translation, that is really powerful. And within the platforms that send out the recorded messages, you can select who it goes out to. So you can build a group around that specific language. And videos, like we're creating a YouTube video today that I know is really popular. And so is there a way to record some of this information? Perhaps by students themselves who speak the language, and what a great way to empower them and to show them how their language is valued, to have them record videos, whether it be for parents or for other students. So again, it comes back to that notion of thinking beyond the traditional. While that may not be something that we traditionally do, it's what meets the needs of that particular group. I've also worked with paraeducators. If I knew there was a family, Hmong is one of the languages that is not a traditionally written language. And we had a parent phone tree, and she would call the first parent and kind of just tell them, this is what's happening and this information is coming today, or just, again, utilizing the resources that you do have in the best way in order to reach certain populations. So that was extremely effective within that one setting. So thinking about how you can leverage the technology you have access to create some of these communication opportunities.
Awesome. Jocelyn, are there other questions out there that you saw?
No other questions on the Q&A.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Henderson. And I think it's time for us to move on to our panel.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And as we go through the show today, just know that you have the opportunity to use that Q&A and ask us questions, because we want to hear from you and we want it to be useful to you as well. So today our panelists are Jennifer Wiley, and Jennifer is a coach with Center for High School Success. And I've worked with Jennifer for a few years now, and seen the awesome work that she's done to help ninth grade success teams build on those connections and think about orientation practices. And she's brought with her Derek Anderson, who is a principal at Grandview High School. Welcome, Derek. And I'm going to stop sharing the slides right now. And I think it would be great if you could talk a little bit about, Jenny, you've been a coach and you've been a principal as well. And what are some of the orientation strategies that you've seen in your experience?
Thank you, Kathy, and everyone for the opportunity to share. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Just want to first build on some of the concepts already outlined by our presenters, which have been amazing. And I just want to drill deeper into a couple of them. Belonging is first and foremost, and just a reminder where our young people are. Front of brain is not fully developed. And front of brain is where all that executive functioning and creativity, new learning, and all of that stuff happens. And when people, whether adults or young people, but especially young people, feel like they do not belong, if there is any wondering about their connection, their value, their worth, their contributions, they tend to leave front of brain and go to the emotional center of the brain, which is near adult-like. So they will sound very adult-like, but they won't be in that front of brain place where you can really learn and build on new learning. And also in that front of brain place is decision-making. And that is not fully developed yet for our young people. Not until the late part of their 20s is that fully developed. So you can imagine if you're feeling disconnected and wondering about your place in the school, particularly if you're a ninth grader in a 9-12 high school, you're the youngest people and newest into the community. That's a recipe for all kinds of wondering about your place in the community. So the likelihood that good decisions or not so good decisions could be made gets bigger, right? People will retreat and go to places where they belong. And sometimes those places aren't helpful towards progress towards graduation. And it may be arguably even more importantly, what's also happening for young people, and Henderson began to touch on this in identity development, is they're leaving their group identity at this place in adolescence. Up until this point, they're identifying as a group, the 8th grade class or my elementary school, and they're trying on their individuated identities. This is who I am as an individual. That is an incredibly vulnerable and scary time. So the combination of all of those things is how our young people are coming into us. And then finally, of course, in most cases, they're leaving a system of schooling, K-8, where social promotion exists and credit bearing is not yet on the scene. So now we're adding a very high stakes accountability metric in the mix of what is already profoundly vulnerable. And we have to be thinking, holding that lens up of all the intersection of those 4 things in all the decision making that we do. So in every strategy that we build for our young people, you want to run it through the loop and ask yourself questions. Am I building connection like Henderson outlined? Am I making the implicit super explicit like Virginia Morales put out there for us? That's especially important for students, whether groups of students or individual students who have historically not been well served by the schoolhouse. Language is super powerful, so in thinking about how even something as small as parent engagement, we ought to be thinking about family and guardian engagement, because we have very different kinds of family structures. So be thinking about belonging through those lenses is super important. And then I'll just add one more thing before I offer up a strategy. I know I can talk. I'll wear out our translators a little bit. The one more thing to keep in mind is I like to carry around a definition of hope and put some flesh on the bones of hope. So when I think about hope, I think of 3 things: having a goal, having a strategy, and having a pathway and access. If all those 3 things are not in play, hopelessness sets in, or despondency, right? So when we think about, let's say we're building a summer program and we have great intentions of connection and all of the wonderful things we've been talking about, but some students aren't able to attend. What's our contingency plan around that? We've created a program that is supposed to increase belonging, but we may have accidentally put a barrier in, an access barrier, having it at a time when some families can attend. Some of our populations vacation or go back to other countries during this time. So making sure that access is always there. Sometimes it's access like the questioner asked or Ms. Morales pointed to around vocabulary and language. So making sure that we have really good access. Sometimes the access is around the skill content, or I don't know how to do school skills. And sometimes the access is just around materials. So be thinking about making sure you're removing all the barriers, that I can just come to school on day 1 and I will have everything I need to be my most amazing self and put my dreams into motion. So if we can think as decision makers and educators, what does it take, to hold that standard? And then you put the structures underneath that. I'll offer one example. I was principal at Franklin High School in South Seattle for a good long time, and we made sure that first week of school had room for 9th graders only built into the schedule on the campus to bring that safety threshold up, that threat threshold down. Like, let 9th graders be there alone and navigate the space. Find out where their classrooms are, meet their teachers, get themselves ready without older kids on campus. You can do that through late starts and the older kids come later in the day, or you can do that through actual days alone with the 9th graders. And then embed all of those amazing activities that Henderson put on the table within that time already built into the school year. And that's not to say you shouldn't have summer transition programs, but just remember you want to double down. And then I would invest in a great amount of time to, again, making the implicit explicit, having very clear and co-created with kids classroom working agreements. This is who we are, and this is what we need as a learning community to make our classroom awesome together, that we're better together, and this is what we need. We want to give, like Henderson talked about, this students opportunity in the decision making. They need to build their classroom community. Then if you're doing circles for repair after that, it's rooted in what got broken. What got broken was the agreements we made together, right? And then we figure out how to repair. So it's not just reactionary, right? It's all part of this is our learning community. And I'll pause there. Happy to offer up others, but I know Derek is in the trench and his team there, who welcome Grandview. Good to see you again. And let him share with you what's working well there. I've had the opportunity to be at some of the opening activities at Grandview. They're amazing.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, I'm Derek Anderson, and this is our 9th grade success team leads, Samantha Castaneda and Vianney Perez. So I brought them into my office, said, come on, I'm not doing this alone. You're going to come in with us and share some of the different activities that we do here at Grandview High School. We really appreciate the 9th grade success team and the Center for High School Success, just infusing a lot of these different strategies and ideas into our school. Some of the things that Jennifer was just talking about as far as 9th grade only focus, we have a GHS 101, which is a 9th grade class that helps to talk about all of the different ways that our students uniquely need that transitionary time during this year because of their identity, because of the way that they're seeing the world, because of the way that they are now interacting with a whole new group of students, all different cohorts and whatnot. The other thing that I would mention is that I'm hearing a lot of multi-layers. And so you need a lot of different entry points for 9th graders and their parents to have access to the school. And so I'll talk just a little bit about what we do at Grandview High School. We actually start in late January or early February and invite all of our the students and their parents from the 8th grade, the incoming 9th grade class, to come in and hear a little bit about our school, about our clubs, about the classes that we have, about the different activities. And we then give them their student registration, so that's part of it. And let them start thinking about, okay, what do I want to do in my 9th grade class? What kind of classes do I want to take? What kind of clubs do I need to be in? Then later on in the spring, in fact, it was just last week, we have a spring fling. And the spring fling is a time, it's sort of a celebratory event. There's colleges there. There's our community-based organizations that come in and offer services. There, we offer some food, and usually there's like some spring sports going on too. So you have there's a lot of things going on, but we open up the school, we have our mariachi band play, and they come in sort of a low risk environment to take a look at another entry point. And then finally, I guess not finally, but in the summertime, we do have a more, I guess I would say, traditional freshman orientation. It is a 2-day in the morning approach where the students come in. We use Link Crew. We have older students that are there to mentor and to show them around the school and to just be a part of their first day experience. They know they're all wearing the same shirt, so they know that they can rely on some of the older students if they have questions and they're a safe person to talk to. Those are mornings, so we do two mornings, and then in the evening of the second day, we invite the parents to come back with the students to have a meal. And so at that time, after we kind of share some general information, we will break out into their advisory groups. So the freshman parents are able to kind of get to know the other parents that are in the same advisory. And that's when they were talking about oral language and how to get information out to people. Yes, we need to use technology, but that face-to-face contact with their teacher and each other, the parents, I say collaborating, but communicating with each other. That's also a really amazing place for them to build those connections. And so that's sort of what we do in a nutshell. We also have one last entry point where we partner with a National Night Out. And so there's the fire department, the police department, and other community-based organizations, and we go out to the park. And that's always kind of a fun time to hand out information, tell different families about what we have ready for them at our school. So that's some of the things that we do. I think, for next year moving forward, we'd like to continue a mentor program. We started having our seniors go down to our freshman advisories and build those connections with them. And we want to continue that. We still have work to do. And so we want to make sure that it's systematic. We want to make sure that it's useful. And so that's one thing that we're planning on continuing to do next year. There's a couple of other questions about, like, hey, what kind of groups do you focus on, or what kind of groups maybe need some special attention or unique attention? And one of those groups is our SPED group. And so we also had an orientation for them. They came up for half the day last week and met their teachers, and they also worked with some leadership students to just become familiar with the spaces and the faces that we have in our school, so that when they arrive, it's not just, whoa, what's going on? They've already walked the classrooms, they've already met the teachers, they've already met some of the students that they're going to be working with as well. So that's one population. And then the other one is our multi-language learners, especially our newcomers, that I was thrilled to hear, Virginia talk about ways to make them feel welcome and a sense of belonging. It is important to, have that unique, personalized experience for the students. And I was going through some of the toolkits that Henderson put out. He emailed them out. They're great resources, and it just talks about, hey, are they welcomed at the door? And when they move through the space, do they know what to do? Do they know where to go? Do they have an assigned seat? Do they, can they greet another person using their first name? And that would probably entail the name badges, good old name badges. But just thinking through all of those little details, understanding the music that they like and it's playing as they enter. And those details are really important, and we want to make sure that we can focus on more of those this next year. And in my role as principal, I don't always think about all those things. And so that's why it's important to have a team, have a team that can think about those things that you're not going to be able to figure out all on your own. So thank you.
Yeah, and Derek, do you want to talk a little bit about, like, you talked about having like a 2-day orientation for your 9th graders. What's the process for putting that together? Do you have like a planning team, or is that your 9th grade success team that's working on that? And like, when does that work start? What does that look like?
Sure. Yeah, we do have a leadership team, and I'll let VNA talk a little bit about that and how they partner. The leadership team partners with our 9th grade success team.
Hi. Yes, so our leadership team does take a vast majority of it over, because a lot of the leaders are the students. And so what we do also during Link Crew is there's different parts of the school where the students visit. And we are located upstairs in the library, and we start talking about the importance of 9th grade and give them a little bit of statistics, and we do survey, and just kind of communicate what our team is, who we are, and then give them familiar faces to look forward to when they come to the high school and know that we're there to help them.
We try to include the ninth grade advisors. We try to include the ninth grade success team, but really most of it is run by our student leadership. So when I say our leadership team, I mean our student leadership team. And so we do open that up to other students who'd like to come in and get volunteer hours and work with the students, but the core is the student leadership team that we have at the school.
Yeah, I love that Grandview has kind of the perspective of making your orientation things events. And so it's so welcoming to think about like a mariachi band and having a meal and like just the various ways that you can make people feel more welcome and included. I think like as a parent, I think about, you know, like my kids are in elementary school, but I don't know how to act as a, you know, middle school, high school parent at all. And so getting those signals like, yeah, we want you to come to the dinner thing. That's not just for the kids, you know, there's a parent component to it. And that kind of structuring, I think, is really helpful signaling, honestly. And I love the idea of having a parent support group. So thinking about pulling parents aside for like, here's some interesting information that you probably need. That sounds awesome. And I'm so curious about how that structure came about. Do you want to talk a little bit more about like what the parent supports look like?
Sure. So, I mean, we have regular booster clubs that each cohort that we have has a boosters club. So we maintain that, and it's been growing each year. It seems to be people are getting more and more willing to participate in the parent boosters. And so I collaborate with them and communicate with them when things are coming up. And then we also have 21st century program in our schools. And so that group also has, we actually have a parent engagement specialist out of that. And so they are able to collaborate and reach out to parents and parent groups that are willing to come in to the school and be a part of this space. So we do a principal coffee with the principal, coffee and donuts with the principal once a month.
Wow.
And they come in and they're able to ask questions, and we'll give tours of the school or we'll visit different parts of the school. And then also receiving, I listen to the parents and listen to their concerns, listen to what's important to them so that we can provide those things and access. And I find that it's really helpful to have those people on your side, as I'm sure you're all well aware. That when you have parents that can speak to the community with knowledge and information that is true and accurate, it really helps to kind of quell maybe some anxieties or some different things that come up when they're just in the community saying, oh, what about this? I heard this is going to happen. What's going on? And so the parent groups can easily talk about the different ways that we, the functions and the different things that we do at the school. So, yeah.
Kathy, I would add on, if I may, that once we get up and running, there's generally a lot of hopefulness. I'll just reinforce that word, right? But good energy and excitement. And then once that excitement wears off, right, it's easy to kind of fall into a dip. So what are the ways that we could maintain it? Some of what Henderson was talking about, long-term ongoing events, the celebrations, the connections, the mentorings, and all of those sorts of things. We would like to offer at CHSS, if you're super ambitious, that inviting your ninth grade teachers to have as many common practices as possible so that our young people with those forming frontal lobes aren't navigating a whole many complicated teacher classroom systems. So the more common that we can have course expectations, the more common that we can have grading practices, the more common we can do any of those infrastructure types of things in the classroom, the less students are using that limited stuff up front while it's developing on navigating school, the more they can focus on building their content skills. So that's some of the work that we do behind the scenes, trying to get ninth grade teachers doing as much common as possible. And if at all possible, for the ambitious in the room that might be admin or counselors, if you could make a period in your master schedule that is ninth grade only, and if you can do that, if you have 2 lunches and you can make a ninth grade only lunch, you can really increase the possibility of much more connection, celebration, town hall meetings, activities that don't disrupt the rest of the schedule. You can build a school within a school like atmosphere that's cost neutral. And it sounds hard to do, but it's actually not as hard to build into the master schedule as it sounds, right? So Center for High School Success, it would be happy to help anybody interested in exploring that model. It really increases the capacity for personalization.
Just kind of building off of that, one entry point for doing that, what we've done this year is to each trimester, we will have like a ninth grade only assembly, for lack of a better term. And so all of the ninth graders go in with their advisory, they sit with their advisories, and then we remind them about, hey, this is where your progress is. This is where we're at. And there's a little bit of a friendly competition. There's some raffles that go out. Hey, anybody that's on track right now, you're in this for this raffle to get a water bottle or something like that. And then we also reward the advisory who's made the most growth. And so we're a trimester school, so you could do it 4 times a year, you can do it 6 times a year, but that's one small way to start doing that. And yes, we do have the ninth grade class that we do. We do not do ninth grade only lunches, but those assemblies, I really feel like those. It's a way to bring them back. It's a way to remind. It's a way to come back to center and say, hey, remember, this is why we're here. This is why we need you to be successful for your futures.
Yeah, and I've seen, like in some of I love these principals who are doing this kinds of work, but one of our principals, like as soon as we come back from break, the first day back from break, we would do orientation all over again. And so it's like, oh yeah, let's remind each other about like these are the hallway expectations and stuff, so that kids kind of got that reset in there too. But I love the idea of like a culture of celebration as well. I know for those of you who know Scott Seaman, he's an AWSP now. But when I was doing my student teaching, I think there was like a class competition, and the winning class got to duct tape him to a flagpole. And at one assembly, they shaved his head. I mean, he went all out so that people could be excited to be at those events. And so also thinking about just like the opportunity, I think, to make, that day at school, people aren't going to miss that day at school. It's an event, right? And so there's excitement about being there, and there's that community feel of having those kind of shared experiences that bring on like that kind of excitement too. I wonder, so Jennifer, in your experience, you've been out there coaching folks. Are there other strategies that you're seeing that are boosting connections, that people are being really targeted about, or that you've been encouraging people to do?
I think there are a lot of variations of many of the things that we've talked about already out there. I also think that schools that have been able to lean into advisories, if they have them, and lean into the how to do school skills, again, making the implicit explicit. We overestimate our young people's knowledge about that stuff, the persistence, the self-advocacy, the self-regulation, all of those competencies. Because that middle of the brain is fully formed, they kind of sound like they have it, but they don't have it, right? So when we take the opportunities to build that in and make sure we're teaching that, again, it's increasing access, enabling their strategies, bringing to life their goals, therefore increasing the hopefulness. And it just better prepares them to be learners beyond 9th grade, of course, 10th grade, and life beyond high school. That body of work, we've been leaning into that in CHSS for a couple of years. And if you haven't dipped into that, I'll put that a website that we refer to often that has free materials, lots of really good stuff. I would highly recommend that. Often when kids don't have those skills, they may have increased absences, because sometimes, again, when you're trying on your identity, you would rather just not be there than be there and be thought of as less than capable. We see what some adults might attribute to lack of motivation really is lack of knowing what to do next, that they're comfortable with a teacher or a paraeducator with them shoulder to shoulder helping them. But once they leave that structure, they don't know what to do next. So developing the self-regulation skills. I know this stuff doesn't sound as rah-rah and exciting and feel good, but it is what keeps that hopefulness lantern alive throughout the rest of their time as learners. So it's a worthy investment. We have a couple of schools who are deep in that in our network. Estacada High School in the Portland area, and some of these materials are on our website and you can grab them free and dip into what they're doing. Really do the competency work exceptionally well, and that competency work then helps feed your intervention systems as well too. You know, so again, these are things that are those year-long strategies that Henderson alluded to. Relationships win out overall, and I did provide a resource in the chat about a particular kind of relationship, a developmental relationship, that is the research-based elements of a relationship that really foster high student performance and engagement. So feel free to dip into that resource too.
Yeah, and Jennifer, you talked a little bit about like your relational trust survey, and I know that that's something. Do you know, like, what's your procedure around offering that, and how are you seeing teams use it?
Great question. So that inventory is part of our partnership with schools. So if you're outside our partnership, that would be harder to access. We built that inventory based on the components of the developmental relationship, which is the document that I put in that in the chat. So basically you can build your own from the elements of that document, and we just build it in Google Forms. And it's a way for us to gather across the full 9th grade or any grade that you want to administer it to, qualitative voice. We need student first person voice, and we need to partner with them shoulder to shoulder in co-creative ways to help build schools that are amazing. We can't do it without them. And we can't do it around them, and we can't do it for them. We have to do it with them. So it is an instrument. Some folks use Panorama, have qualitative data in Panorama. Oftentimes Panorama is something that gets done a couple of times a year and sits somewhere inaccessible, right? So if counselors and admin can breathe life into that data, grab onto a component where you may see some dips in connection, and then build a strategy on how we're going to, as a 9th grade team, increase that component. How are we going to measure it? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What do we do when it's not there? Dig into action cycles or learning cycles that center there. You cannot go wrong in increasing both relationship and elevating student voice in real and meaningful ways, with intentional scaffolding and outreach for those students who we have historically left out of the conversation.
I think, Derek, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just, we did use that tool here at Grandview High School, and we shared it with our counselors, just if there was any kind of uptick, and we don't have a trusted adult that we know of at the school. So it helps with that identification. And then I know another CWAC school in our area, they have a tool that the students check in every Monday.
Oh, wow.
And if they score like a lower score, like they're feeling down in the dumps or something like that, then the information gets sent to the counselors. And again, they kind of have a gauge of, hey, this is somebody that we should really check in on. So it's just a tool to do that. I shared the cccframework.org, which talks about, self-care, self-regulation, perseverance, what they call soft skills, which we know aren't really soft skills anymore, and asked our staff to, hey, integrate this into your lessons. Do it once a week. Do it when it relates, but make sure that we're taking a look and turning our eye to empathy, teamwork, assertiveness, all of these different ways that we can build those skills in our students so that they have a way to communicate and a way to interact with each other on a deeper level.
Yeah, that is amazing. Well, and thinking about the standards for social and emotional learning is it's a great place to start too. Like, how can we build those into like the everyday events where we're bringing students together? I want to give our panel kudos and thank you so much for being on our panel today. We are going to share a couple of resources and let me share these slides. We hope that our conversation doesn't end here, of course. We hope that you talk to your team about what your orientation could look like. And if you have any ideas from this to share with your leadership team, we hope you will. And also, if you want to talk to your PLC about it, what does our department do to welcome students specifically? What are our opening kind of activities where we're helping people think about our disciplines? Or also talking just to students about what would make them feel welcome and how can we invite you in? What would you get excited about? Good things. So there's a couple of resources that we have available for you. Through OSPI, there's various grants that you can tap into. A lot of people can use title funds and things like that to help with orientation costs. We have a document here for funding if you want to check it out. And these resources are in our resource sheet as well. We also have a monthly newsletter. So each month we'll have our topics and the newsletter is connected to it. Usually our keynote does an awesome job at doing like a feature article for us to talk about some of the big ideas they're going to cover in our webinar. And you'll also get things like the care package. Our care package has links to toolkits and articles and all kinds of stuff that you can use with your leadership team. We also have an Engage Ninth Graders in Community Building Activities link here, as well as that newcomer toolkit that Virginia was talking about, and the Washington State Multilingual Learners Policies and Practices Guide. So those are cool things to tap into. CHSS, the Center for High School Success, also gave us these awesome links for their summer transition planning guide. If you want to take a deep dive in how to prep for the next school year, this is such a great resource, and I really want to encourage you to just take a look at it and show your team and think about that. CHSS also has this awesome roadmap that talks about some of the foundational practices to creating that sense of belonging and the systems that are going to hold up your team over the course of the year by providing timely supports. We are really happy to help you. I mean, I'm sure any of us would love to get an email from you if you have questions. We also have like a Ask OSPI staff, and we'll connect you that way as well.
Kathy, can I add one footnote?
Oh yeah, please do.
No meeting would be complete with you and me if I didn't do that, right? I would just say, if you're not already a member school with Center for High School Success, please contact Henderson and or Kefi and explore whether your school may be a good fit to work with our great network across the state.
Absolutely. Yeah, our grant is expanding. We were so fortunate this year to get additional funds for ninth grade success. And so our grant actually funds work like this for orientation practices. And you get to work with awesome people like Jennifer and Henderson over the course of the year. And yeah, totally good place to be. Thanks for the reminder, Jennifer. Yeah, so next year, well, not next year, but next school year in August, we'll have our next show. Please do sign up and join us this next year for our continued webinars as they're going to be on. That link's also going to be in your on the webinar page, so you'll be able to access it there over the summer if you forget to. And I would encourage y'all, like, if you know people who need equity clock hours, we give free equity clock hours. So that's an opportunity for you as well. And I'm gonna look at the polls and we're gonna do this evaluation poll. It's our last one. And each show we look at our evaluations and try to make sure that we're meeting your expectations and hopefully exceeding them. But we do have like a longer form feedback evaluation that will launch after you're out of the webinar, and it just takes a few minutes. And if you do have additional ideas for speakers or for topics you want us to cover, if you don't like the day of the week, you can tell us all of that in that survey. So I want to encourage you to take the time to let us know what you think. We'd also love for you to get those free clock hours for joining us. So if you joined live today, you already, you've been registered, but just for this year, not for August. So just know that you'll need to register again for next year's. But PD Enroller is going to send you an evaluation to your email. We'll verify your attendance and we release your hours after that's done. If you watch the recording later, the process changes a little bit. You register each month for clock hours in PD Enroller, and then you complete the evaluation for PD Enroller, but you'll also do our feedback survey, and that just signals to us that you watched the video, because otherwise we wouldn't know. So we verify your attendance every few weeks with that, and then we release your hours after we've verified. If you have questions about this, you can email Ronnie Larson. She's awesome, and she does our clock hours support. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you hopefully in August.